This is Saturday Morning Mysteries.
And we're your hosts, Alexis and Grace.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Saturday Morning Mysteries, where we are your hosts. I'm Grace.
And I'm Alexis.
And we are currently covering an arc of the Wild Thornberrys. It's a mixture so far of survival stories, international crime, life lessons. It's got it all. This week, Alexis will be recapping another episode of this wonderful and adventurous family. So we'll just get right into it.
We'll get right into it. More crime, more wild stories, courtesy of the Wild Thornberrys. And so this week, we join the Thornberrys again, at least per my episodes. They're back in South America. But this time, they're in Peru, more specifically in the Andes Mountain region, just outside of the city of Cusco. And so, first tangent of this episode, Cusco, gonna start them early. Cusco may sound familiar to many of the millennials listening, particularly as the name of the unfortunate emperor turned llama in the animated Disney movie, The Emperor's New Groove, which took place in the ancient Inca Empire. But in reality...
This is the second time in this arc that we've talked about Emperor's New Groove.
Yes, it is. We're bringing it back to a lot of references in this show. And
Amazing.
It's now our second time talking about like ancient Mesopotamian empires when we talked about the Aztecs back during Scooby-Doo.
Yes, amazing.
So I can't avoid them. But in reality, Cusco is not only the name of that character who was portrayed as an Incan emperor, but it is also actually the name of a city in southeastern Peru near the Urubamba Valley of the Andes mountain range. Not too far, actually, from Machu Picchu, which was a city-state, I think, or like a citadel in the Inca Empire. Anyway, Cusco, it's the capital of the Cusco region and the Cusco province in Peru. And it is the seventh most populous city in Peru, with a population of like just shy of 500,000 people. In 2017, it was 428,000, so probably a little bit more by now, with an elevation also of about 11,200 feet. So it is very, very high up. Again, being in the Andes mountain range, literally like in a valley towards the top of these mountains or like within these mountains. So why is it so important, not only in terms of the Emperor's New Groove, but in terms of like the Inca Empire? Turns out that it was the capital city of the empire from the 13th century until the 16th century Spanish conquests in the 1530s. We've talked about those in the past as well. Go back to that Scooby-Doo episode where we talked about them too. Anyway, whatever. So in 1983, Cusco was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, so the United Nations, and the Constitution of Peru actually designates it as the historical capital of Peru. So it has a lot of history and culture since it was the Incan capital. And it has, because of that, become a major tourist destination where they have nearly 2 million visitors come a year. I think actually that number was maybe pre-COVID, so maybe things have changed since then, but it is like the tourist hub and the cultural hub of Peru. So anyway, I thought that stuff was interesting. I've never been to Peru before, or South America for that matter. So I'm like, hey, anything I can do to learn about it and to force that education, that knowledge onto you all.
This whole time, all I've been singing in my head is in the Emperor's New Groove, when you first meet Cusco, there's like a chorus line, Cusco, and it's like a little Elvis impersonator and like a chorus line of girls, and he's walking in like that, and then the little old man ruins his groove right there.
But
anyways,
is the national anthem.
Yeah, that wasn't a Disney creation. That's
the
national anthem.
Yeah, actually, Disney was just reinterpreting the song. It was a cover that they did for for the movie.
Wow, they did a great job. Usually
They did.
covers,
Good
not
job,
as
David
good.
Spade.
This one though,
Yeah, this one is
pretty
a
good.
banger. They figured
It's a
it
banger.
out.
God, I'm gonna watch
So
that movie this weekend.
I may or may not have like put it on in the background one day this
Just
week after I finished this
inspiration.
episode. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I need to get in the mindset.
It's one of my favorites.
What would the early 2000s animators at Disney feel
In this
talking about
moment.
Peru in this moment, the Incan
Amazing.
Empire? Yes. So, anywho, the Thornberrys, the family, they've planned to go into Cusco, or kind of, more into the actual mountain range area, to obtain some grade A vampire bat footage deep in the mountains of Cusco. And they're going to do this by enlisting in the help of Marianne's old professor and the world's foremost expert on vampire bats, at least in the Wild Thornberry universe, a man by the name of Professor or Dr. Renfield Spinoza. And I'm going to tangent again here. We'll get all the tangents out in the beginning of this episode.
Is it about vampire bats?
It is, and vampires in general. And more specifically, the small nod that the writers made that I only saw as like in a triple take. But the fact that Spinoza, Dr. Spinoza's first name is Renfield, is beautiful because, okay, and they don't actually ever say his full name in this. You only notice it because at one point Eliza is reading a book on vampire bats that is written by this man, Renfield Spinoza. So you see his name on the front of the book. And the name Renfield is so perfect because Renfield is a supporting character in the 1897 Gothic horror novel Dracula by Bram Stoker, and in almost all iterations, like film readaptations or whatever of that book. Yeah. So he, in almost all iterations, and including the original, Renfield is Count Dracula's servant and familiar, who happens to be very erratic and unstable, I'll say in the kindest of terms, I guess, without sounding ableist. And he's often eating bugs and insects and like birds and stuff
in like the actual books and
in the books and in like some of the movies. Yes. Because, well, I don't know how much people are into the Dracula lore. I guess it's not really spoiling it because, again, the book originally came out in 1897. So essentially, he was a very troubled man, but Dracula uses him as his agent. I think he had like PTSD or something from a war in the original novel, maybe something like that. And Dracula uses him to just as a familiar to help carry out a lot of his like evil doings and to I guess seduce certain women, like the main character, the female in the first one is like Mina Harker. And so he turns Renfield essentially into a vampire, I believe. So Renfield himself, who is like this agent of Dracula, is also thirsty for blood in a lot of ways. And
great.
If you're interested in clinical psychology, or I'm sure that it's come up in some like criminal cases, yes. If you've ever heard of the term Renfield syndrome, aka clinical vampirism, it's when people are obsessed with eating blood or drinking blood. That is, now you know where the name came from. Renfield. Yes. So in some cases, I think they depict him as like a real estate agent. Originally, I don't know if he was a real estate agent in the original book, but future like adaptations, whatever, of the book and of other older movies have depicted him as a real estate agent for Dracula, who's helping him find a new home in London, moving from Wismar to... Anyway, it's a whole thing. So I just love that they named Dr. Spinoza Renfield in this, and I never noticed it until I was like rewatching this. Yeah, like they never call him that, and even like the fandom page and stuff didn't pick up that little fun fact. But I was like, I have to give a nod to the writers. Also, it's funny because a movie Renfield just came out a couple weeks ago, I think, where Nicolas Cage plays Dracula.
God damn it. What?
So very topical as well.
Wow. That's awesome.
And so
good work. Good sleuthing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I had to like pause and like zoom in, like put my glasses on. Like, is his name Renfield? How beautiful of a fun fact is that?
Yeah, at first I was like, what a weird
But
fucking name. But
yeah,
now,
but
what a cool
now
name.
the writers knew what they were doing, or the
Yep.
animators perhaps, because again, it wasn't written into the script. They just decided to
Ah,
draw his name as that on the front of the book that Eliza happens to be reading
either way, props.
about vampire bats. And so let us talk about the vampire bat, which hilariously also, I think I've done a spiel on bats in the past, like fruit bats, I think, in an episode of
I think
Darkwing
we did
Duck.
talk about fruit bats before. Yeah.
That offensive episode that I think maybe was briefly canceled. So go back and learn about that one time.
Which one? There were multiple episodes of Darkwing
You've done a
Duck
canceled one. I've done a canceled one.
Yeah.
Go back and listen to our DW, our Darkwing Duck arc. It's funny. Anyway, so like that discussion of fruit bats, though, I will kick this one off by also saying that vampire bats is also a kind of broad term that defines, I think, like 3 different species of bats that have evolved to, of course, as we all know, unfortunately, feed exclusively on blood. And so the 3 types are, you've got your common vampire bat, just the normal everyday vampire bat.
Just the normal bloodsucker.
You've got your hairy-legged vampire bat. So they've got legs that are hairier than the average, I suppose. These are scientific terms here, okay? And then you've got your white-winged vampire bat.
Wow, they got real literal.
Yeah, very literal. I don't have any jokes for them. So anyway, all these bats, they primarily feed on the blood of mammals, occasionally including humans. And I should have looked it up, like how many people are bitten each year, but I guess it's like kind of that would be hard to track. I did see that there were like 55 cases of rabies or something like that in South America between like 2005 and 2020 or something like that. Or I don't know, or maybe it was just in the year 2005. That wouldn't seem like a lot. But rabies from being bit by bats. Yes.
It's very funny that you're doing this episode right now because weirdly, I recently learned a bunch about vampire bats.
Nice. Oh, please.
Because of that fave podcast, Tooth and Claw.
Yeah.
They have a whole episode about vampire bats, mainly because, if they give people rabies, like there are cases of technically like vampire bats have killed people, aka transfer of rabies. But basically that's to say, if you want to know more detail, go listen to the vampire bat episode of Tooth and Claw after you get the brief information from our episode right here. So that's why I was so excited when you said vampire bat. I was like, I know about them. Tell me more.
Be scared. Yes.
No.
And maybe you
knowledge
can tell
is power,
more.
Bird. And I have knowledge now. I'm not scared of them.
I have power.
So I have power.
I have power. Well, so yes, go to Tooth and Nail after this. But I will add just a few more fun facts that I read and thought would be kind of interesting. Not really relevant to this episode, but like,
I don't care. Give it to me.
Knowledge is power. Exactly.
Yeah. Inject animal facts into my veins right now.
So just like the blood that these vampire bats take out of your veins, I will inject knowledge right back in. Yes. So, and on that note, I will say the typical female vampire bat weighs about 40 grams, which I did the conversion, 0.088 pounds. So very small. But weighs about 40 grams and can consume over 20 grams though of blood in 20 minutes. So half of its weight, which again, it's small. I think a lot of videos define them as like thumb-sized animals that I watch, like Nat Geo. Yeah, so very small.
I guess I didn't realize they were that
pounds. Yeah, they are. But still half of its weight. So I guess if vampire humans or whatever were such a thing, would we assume that a vampire like Dracula could consume half of his weight in like 20 to 30 minutes proportionally? I don't know. That would be kind of terrifying though, if someone could real quick, like in 20 minutes, drink, I don't know, 100 pounds of straw. Yeah, just constantly slurping it through, which is, so I learned a lot about vampires too for this, but which is how they actually drink it. Like they don't, they don't like, well, I should say this, their teeth are so small and sharp, and because the bats themselves are so small, they can bite into like a cow, for example, or like pigs, whatever, goats, and they won't even, the mammal won't even feel it because the teeth are so like small and sharp. And so they really just actually make that point of incision, and they don't like slurp the blood out, they just like lick the blood out as it's flowing out of the animal. Which, like, I was watching this video from Nat Geo where they zoomed in on it, and I was like,
why? Why would you watch that?
Why? Because I had to learn about them for you, Grace.
Do you want, I like don't want to steal your vampire bat thunder at all, but do you want to also hear a fun fact about how they drink the blood? Is that the reason that they like lick it up is that they have some type of like chemical or substance that they like secrete or on their tongue. Are you about to say this fact?
I'm not, but I think I maybe know it from my research, but go ahead.
That it causes, basically the like reason why they also like lick that open wound is that like material on their tongue causes it to not, I can never say this word correctly. Coagulate. Thank you. Yeah. Like I just looked at you. I was like, say it for me, please. Yes.
Yes. So that they can keep getting their fix without it getting all hard. And
exactly, which is fucking wild.
Yeah.
And that human scientists,
quite fascinatingly.
Yeah, and that like scientists have not been able to ever replicate it. Like they want to for like medical reasons, but they've never been able to replicate this like little substance that the little bats are just like just like that.
Just like that
invitation.
We'll do that again. If only the bats were that cute. They actually are kind of cute and adorable, though. They're just,
I'm not gonna watch that video.
Don't, because their tongue is like very long proportional to their body. So it was gross. I was like, I was grossed out by the tongue, not by like the blood or like anything like that. Literally just the tongue. Like,
that's the only part I'm like concerned about
long?
Too. Put it back in there.
But so yes, the amount of blood that the vampire bat consumes in like any one feeding is not going to be enough to kill an animal because again, the bats are so small. Only the subsequent rabies diagnosis will do that. Which also, interestingly and terrifyingly, other bats, like fruit bats and stuff, they are pretty much unable to like maneuver on land. Like they're only good at flying, and even that they're not that good at because they're kind of like blind. But vampire bats can walk. They can like jump or like hop like frogs, and they can even run, which is how they often start their attacks on prey, like cows. Like they'll like kind of creep around the corners. And God, this was in the video.
Did you watch a video of it too?
I did. It was in the same Nat Geo, man. It was like a 3-minute video, and they showed all the most terrifying things that vampires can do. This thing hopped. It like hopped towards the camera, and I shit you not, I like jumped. Like, oh my God, it's gonna kill me.
No, thank you.
It literally hops like a frog, like it leaped, but it's a furry little bat, and it like walks on its knuckles or whatever, and like can run around, and I will not be creepy.
Consuming this content.
Yes, I mean it's again only 3 minutes, but yeah, kind of. I'm scarred from watching it.
What if Bram Stoker was like, I should make this really realistic and had Dracula walk around on all fours.
And like hop
his victim
leaps. Yeah. Honestly, would be even scarier.
Yeah, that is true. And horror movies are like people crawling. Yeah, you're right. I take it back. Glad I didn't.
Glad they did not do that. And then something crawling to then suck your blood would be terrifying. But in much less scary terms, I'll end my vampire bat spiel by saying that they do indeed tend to live in colonies. Which, okay, maybe this is a little scary, but it can be anywhere from like a single digit to like hundreds of bats large. So like, I don't know, could be 9, could be 300.
Could be 900.
Could be 900. Could be up to 999, according to Wikipedia.
I'm uninterested in finding out, personally.
Well, let's go find a cave. Eliza and her family are about to find out. Yes.
Oh no.
And speaking of Cusco, bringing it full circle now, in terms of like where bats come from, they do, vampire bats in particular, they do range from Central to South America. Okay. So we're safe, maybe. I don't know.
The next question maybe. I was like, so not
so not
here
in like the Pacific Northwest. or the East Coast.
Like, we're good.
Northeast, I think we're safe. Other bats, probs. Vampire bats, probs not. And yes, they have a natural lifespan of about 9 years. So,
okay.
All we have to do is live for 10 years and we're
I'll outlive them all.
I'll outlive them. Oh shit, no, another one was just born.
Right, constantly. Oh no, they'll outlive me.
So, all right, what does this all have to do with the Thornberrys and their weekend getaway / work trip in Peru? Well, it is a cloudy evening. A storm is brewing, coming in, and they're driving the convoy up this like winding road in the Andes Mountains, passing by a bunch of llamas, which, by the way, this proves in this episode here that Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers indeed did record for each episode, because as they're driving through these mountains, Donnie looks out the window and says, "Llama."
Well, he like says a word.
Yeah, it's still like in his kind of like he says like llama, which I guess is actually maybe closer to
more accurate. I was gonna say, does Donnie know Spanish secretly?
Probably. He's a wild child, man. He
never
knows
know
it all. But yes, so he did at least had to read like that specific line Flea did in the studio for this particular episode.
I think he came back for every episode.
Probably he did. He took a lot of care into getting in the moment for Donnie. Exactly. But anyway, so yes, they're driving up. There's like thunder and lightning kind of like striking overhead, or you can hear it in the background as clouds are kind of moving in and the wind is picking up as they're driving up these Andes mountains in Cusco. Or I guess maybe just outside of Cusco, because inside of the convoy, you've got like Debbie and Eliza reading this book about vampire bats, which I noted earlier was written by Dr. Spinoza. And you have Marianne driving and Nigel like pontificating about how they have a duty to capture authentic footage of the vampire bat and, change the negative stigma that's often applied to these docile creatures.
That Nat Geo footage you watched was from Nigel.
Would prove otherwise. No, it was not. Nigel's trying to cover that up, man. It made these things look like menaces. They're like hopping around, leaping on. It actually showed it jump on a cow and suck its blood, Grace. I was like watching this footage, like, wait, do they just like, they're just letting these cows be consumed?
Yeah, because when they film
bats,
nature footage, they're like ethically not
very
supposed
natural
to interfere.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess they just had the blessing of whoever owned this farm. Like, yeah, sure, you can set your camera up right there. It's like the camera is set up right by this like fence right outside of a cattle farm, like zoomed in, just looking.
Oh my God.
It, like zooms in as a bat hops right on one of the cows' backs. And it's like, ooh, get in closer. Yeah,
zoom in.
Capture, zoom in, get it. Yeah. So okay. Nigel's like, no, that's just propaganda. That's propaganda.
It's the anti-bat propaganda. Shut it down.
So anyway, you've got like Debbie is creeped out as her dad's talking about bats, saying that they're just like rodents that fly essentially, and they bite you and are gross. And she wishes that her family had just left her at their hotel in Cusco, because at least they had like satellite TV and she could just be chilling in the hotel room, watching TV, not having to deal with these bats and the impending storm that's coming in overhead.
Of course there is.
As per usual, right? It's like they schedule their excursions for storm season literally all the time. So Nigel, though, he's assuring her that as soon as they like talk to Dr. Spinoza and learn more about the bats, that she'll start to warm up, that Debbie will start to warm up about them. And so Marianne, meanwhile, because I mentioned earlier that Dr. Spinoza was her college professor. So she's like reminiscing about the old days, freshman year at UC Berkeley, she mentions. So that's where Marianne went to school, by the way. Smart woman.
Nice.
And she's like reminiscing about taking Dr. Spinoza's biology class in college, saying that she almost dropped out of school so that she could join him on an expedition to study fruit bats. And Nigel looks at her like, oh, Marianne, I had no idea that you had such a passion for bats. And hilariously, Marianne's like, I didn't. Child me would have never understood that. But adult me instantly was like, oh shit, Marianne, does that mean what I think it does? And it does. In fact, there's an entire B plot in this episode. I'm just going to say it from the front now so I don't have to like reference it every time because she keeps making jokes throughout the entire episode about how she had a huge crush on Professor Dr. whatever Spinoza.
Oh my God.
And like the entire car ride up this mountain, she's like hyping him up, saying he's so intelligent and so handsome and such a scholarly man. And she keeps just like dozing off, like daydreaming about it, while also like, Marianne, you're driving. This is a very
oh gosh, she's driving.
windy road. Yes, there's a storm coming in. Please pay attention.
Oh
she
my
keeps
God.
like falling silent, like eyes all like glazing over,
Glittery.
just remembering her days in Dr. Spinoza's class.
Wow, girl.
But she's also like, don't worry, Nigel. It was like 20 years ago. It was just, it was so long ago. I barely even remember what Dr. Spinoza looks like now.
Sure, girl.
So keep in mind that's going on in the background here. Hilariously.
Excellent. It's the perfect backdrop.
Beautifully written. And so after this long climb up the mountains, the Thornberrys, they finally arrive at Dr. Spinoza's legit like castle on top of a mountain. Not sure what kind of strings he had to pull with UNESCO to get title to this place. I feel like it should be in like historical, like cultural preservation and not just be this man's house, but he lives here. And the castle just screams Dracula, right?
I was going to say, it's like a European castle.
It actually kind of looks like a South American castle. Like it's got like terracotta roofing. It's made of stone.
Okay,
it honestly looks like it's built on top of ruins, like this plateau of stones that then like has this long stone staircase leading up to it. Yes, good. Questionable.
Great.
Again,
questionable.
Dr. Spinoza, who is allowing you to live here? Maybe he's doing some side work for the UN and they're like, okay, fine. Like, yeah, you can stay here.
That's like a research facility. Maybe
like he's put up giant portraits of himself on the inside. He does also have kind of like a Spanish accent though, too, when we hear him talking later. So whatever.
The least Spanish name of all time.
Kind of, yes.
Renfield.
Spinoza. I'm like, Renfield Spinoza. I don't know.
Okay.
But anyway.
He's an enigma.
Yes. So we'll talk about that later. But anyway, so this castle just screams Dracula, old, massive, made of stone. And of course, though, when the Thornberrys arrive, there's like lightning that's consistently just flashing behind it.
Course.
And so after reading about vampire bats and everything, the girls, Debbie and Eliza, are a little on edge because they don't want to see any bats inside of this castle. And once they get out of the convy and like get a good look at it, Eliza is even more apprehensive. And she like whispers over to Darwin that it reminds her of a castle that she saw in a vampire movie not long ago. AKA probably Dracula or like Nosferatu or something. Nickelodeon just didn't want to name drop and get in any sort of copyright issues. Yep. Whatever. So her fears start to grow when she overhears some nearby animals gossiping about the homeowner, saying that, AKA Spinoza, saying that all he does is roam around the caves late at night, making a bunch of noise when he should be sleeping. And so Eliza's like, excuse me, that sounds like vampire activity. No, thank you.
He's a vampire. Oh, no.
Yes. So Debbie, at this point, right as Eliza's like eavesdropping on these animals, Debbie sneaks up on her and scares her.
Nice.
And so they have this whole thing going back and forth where they're trying to like one up each other and out prank each other and kind of scare each other. Since I should have added, this was a Halloween episode, which, oops, I didn't realize until after I wrote it. Could have saved it for our Halloween arcs that we do in October.
Too bad.
But so this whole episode's about like, oh, who can scare who the most and whatever, vampires, Halloween, blah, 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 whatever. And so Debbie essentially bullies Eliza into going into the castle, like, oh, what are you just so scared? Too scared to go in there? And Eliza's like, are you kidding me? No, I'm brave. I can do this. And so the family makes their way up to these like massive wooden doors out front of the castle, where they have like this door knocker that is literally bigger than like Nigel's head. It's just massive, just to kind of get a sense of how
family
ornate.
Member with the biggest head.
But yes, it's because he's the one who is like knocking on the door, and I was like, that's literally bigger than his face. It's huge. This castle is massive. And so the doorway quickly opens, and we see a short, bald man with very thin but long mustache, almost like the French ones, but very, just little wisps that curl over, a very long, pointy nose, not like Nigel's like wide, deep nose, but just like almost like a Pinocchio type nose, just comes straight out, long, pointed nose.
She had a crush on him.
It gets better.
Oh no.
And he only has like a few teeth, and they're spread out throughout his mouth, maybe like 10 teeth total, 5 on top, 5 on the bottom.
Are you good?
And he's got like these crazy eyes. Like one is mostly closed and the other is like very large.
Oh my God, terrifying.
And, like doesn't blink. And he's got on this suit. Oh my God, this suit and a long black cape that has like a red interior, so very like Dracula-esque. And when the man opens the door, Marianne's like, who are you?
Oh.
And he responds, well, I'm Dr. Spinoza. And then he like starts to evilly and like maniacally laugh as like thunder and lightning is like flashing behind him. And Nigel gets very smug and just looks at Marianne like, really?
This
is the guy? This is the guy? And Marianne, her jaw is just dropped like, you're Dr. Spinoza. Spinoza, he's like, so what brings you here to my home? And they tell him that they were hoping to interview him and get some vampire bat footage for their show, since he's, the world expert, the leading expert on bats. And Spinoza's like, yes, it's time that the world knew the truth about the vampire bat.
Oh, no.
And he's just very erratic and kind of seems unhinged, so to speak.
Like Renfield.
Exactly is what I was going to say, is why it's so beautiful that they gave him Renfield as his first name.
Wow.
So he then makes his way over to introduce himself to Debbie and Eliza, saying, oh, and who are these children who would make just a wonderful snack, which gross for a few different reasons. But then he quickly stops himself and corrects course and says, I mean, perhaps they would like a snack.
Sorry, you've already said it.
Yeah,
we can't come back.
We can't unhear it. So he then like turns around and tells the family like, okay, come on in, follow me. And he's like playing with this cape as he says it, just like, look at my cape. It's beautiful.
If you have a cape, you must play with it.
You have to. Exactly. It's the law. And so at this point, after he's like got his back turned to them and he's walking back into this castle, literally all of the Thornberrys, Donnie and Darwin included, at the same time, just look at Mary. Like they all pause and just like turn and look at her. Like, what the fuck? Who is this dude? Marianne, what is wrong with you? And Marianne's like, I guess 20 years is a long time. Like my memory is a bit clouded. Like age, does wonders to us all. And Spinoza turns around like 20 years is nothing when you live forever.
Oh my God.
Just like still being very, very weird.
Yes.
Yes. So the family, they all follow him into the castle and he's showing them around the area. And pretty much they split up, right? So Eliza, Debbie, Darwin, and Donnie, they kind of go off on their own way, while Nigel and Mary, they're like, you guys stay very far away from this man. You guys go play in the castle. Nigel and Marianne, they're like, we'll go with Dr. Spinoza to talk more about bats and maybe he can lead us to get some footage. Yes. So Dr. Spinoza, Marianne, and Nigel, they like go to the dining hall. And Spinoza offers them mate, so almost like yerba mate, which is a South American beverage. It's it's like an herbal beverage that's stronger than coffee, which Nigel accurately says, actually. He's like, nice. Yes, it's a traditional Peruvian beverage that's much stronger than coffee, which I didn't go too deep in it, but like, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Although it's maybe more common in other areas of South America than Peru, but whatever, it's down there still. So again, good job to the writers. It exactly still counts. And so Marianne, though, she asks Dr. Spinoza if he's going to enjoy some of this mate with them, but then he just like dramatically stands in front of the fire, like the fireplace. It's got this roaring fire in it. He just stands there and looks at it. You just see this shadow almost behind the fire. And he's like, I do not drink mate. And then just like starts evilly laughing again. And Marianne and Nigel are just quiet and like look at each other like, okay.
That's when you chuck the mate over your shoulder. It's just like, definitely poison.
Either. Yeah, no. Marianne, let me know how it tastes.
You take the first sip, okay, honey?
Cool. And I'll just sit here and watch for like 30 minutes or so. So anyway, yeah, at this point, Spinoza, anyway, he's asking Nigel and Marianne, like, do you find my behavior horrifying at all? And Nigel shrugs it off, like, well, not horrifying. Marianne, yeah, exactly. Like maybe a little unhinged, but horrifying, no. And so Marianne just like cuts him off and jumps to the point, like, all right, look, can we like get some footage of vampire bats? Like maybe you don't have to be in it, realizing like maybe he's not screen ready. He might get a little camera shy. But anyway, can we just like get some footage so that we can tell the world the truth about vampire bats? But then Spinoza like leans into Marianne, like grabs a hold of her chair and erratically just starts yelling like, so you mean I can finally get the chance to tell the world that the vampire bat turns its victims into tormented souls of the undead?
Oh God.
And Marianne just like gets out of her chair and stands by Nigel.
And Nigel's like, this guy?
And Marianne's like, no, when I said the truth about vampire bats, I meant like, the truth. And Nigel just leans in and whispers to her like, Marianne, maybe we should just like play along with whatever nonsense Spinoza's spewing.
For your safety.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like let's just play along and we can like keep things moving. And so Nigel's like, tell you what, Dr. Spinoza, if you show us some of your bat caves, you can then just in return, you can turn me into whatever mindless zombie you want. Okay.
Oh God.
And so Spinoza's like, you wish to meet my children? And then just starts evilly cackling and laughing at them. And Nigel, again, just leaning into it, playing along. He's like, well, yeah, you met ours, so like, isn't it only fair? And Spinoza's like, you know what? Yeah, actually, you make a good point. He nods. He's like, all right, follow me. As he's like slowly limping out of the room and like stops to just like stare behind them and look at the Thornberrys, and the Thornberrys are just standing there like staring at each other. And again, Nigel like grins at Marianne like,
this guy,
this is the guy I was worried about. Really? They're like clearly so off put by this man, though. It's very funny every time he does something. Like he's consistently doing this stuff. I can't describe every crazy like weird unhinged thing he does, because it's just every single thing he says, and I'm not even gonna try to imitate his accent as he's doing it. But like every time he does something, Marianne and Nigel just like stare at each other like, and then just like stare at him in silence like, are you done, sir?
Yikes.
So weird. But he does live up to the promise, and he leads them to a bat cave on the property. But just like the whole hike up there, he's just acting so strange, like pretending that he doesn't have a reflection and pretending that he like will melt in the light. And obviously insinuating that he himself is a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
And Marianne is like, how could he have changed so much in 20 years? Like, what the hell happened to this guy? And Nigel just tells her, like, oh, you were just likely blinded by his intellect. And she's like, oh, shut up. pushes him away. Like, get the fuck out of my face,
Now
Nigel.
Marianne's like, this guy?
This guy, really? But yes, like I said, he lives up to the promise, Dr. Spinoza, and he actually finds them a great spot to shoot for the show. And when they get there, though, he's like attempting to summon his children, like, be free. I'm free out of this cave. And like nothing happens. And then he's like running around and stuff as the Thornberrys are just setting up the camera. Like, okay, whatever. He's just let him do his thing. And so, yeah, it's whatever. He's just doing his thing. So I'll just leave it at that. I was going to add on to it, but yes, just know this guy, they're questioning his sanity. Let me just put it that way. So meanwhile, though, I mentioned that the kids kind of broke off and were just like running around this amazing, but also very creepy, legit, kind of terrifying looking castle. And they're really just like kind of playing tag or like hide and go seek, trying to one up each other on scaring one another. And even like Donnie and Darwin are getting in on it too and trying to also scare them. So in their competition of scaring one another, they somehow, the whole gang finds themselves in the basement, or really what truly looks like the dungeon of this old castle, like straight out of Dracula. You've got like candles lining the hall, all of these corridors that just are dark beneath, like going beyond them, like you don't know what the hell is down there.
Don't
very
go down
creepy
there.
Looking. Hey, they're trying to scare each other and prove that one of them is braver. So
a good setup.
Yeah. So anyway, Eliza, though, she opens a door in one of these hallways, and all that she sees is a long open room with nothing in it but the classic wooden coffin sitting on the other end, and just like candles lining the hall or the room. I would be fucking terrified.
I'd be in the comfy.
I would run the fuck out of there. You would never see me in that castle ever again. But it gets scarier because the door to this room closes behind Eliza, and she starts to hear like moaning and all of these loud noises coming from within the dungeon. And slowly the coffin starts to open, and she's just screaming, terrified out of her mind. But it's okay because it's just Debbie who's one-upped her and pops out. It's funny though, she's like done her hair to like look like the Bride of Frankenstein, almost like sticking straight up. And she has like her collar is popped on her flannel, and she found this cape or whatever. So
I mean, that's a good
dressed the part. But yes, thankfully it's just her, and like Darwin and Donnie also like pop up from behind the shadows. They were in on it with Debbie, which is sad. Like they all teamed up to scare Eliza. Like,
I mean, you gotta form alliances. Sorry, it's the Eliza.
D's. Debbie, Darwin, and Donnie.
Sure, sorry, you can't sit with us.
You can't sit with us. Sorry, you're gonna get scared.
You can't sit with us in our coffin.
Did Gretchen say that too? Not obviously the coffin part, but yeah, you can't sit with us.
You can't sit with us. That's where the line was born.
That's
and then she improv'd it in Mean Girls.
She's like, I remember when I had to read that in Wild Thornberrys. That was the scariest episode I've ever done. I would hate to be Katie in this moment.
It kind of does seem like the scariest episode.
Yeah, it's Halloween. So anyway, Eliza, though, she's totally not amused by this cruel prank that her entire family pulled against her. And so she shrugs it off like, fine, whatever, you got me, ha ha ha. But then she asks Debbie how she was able to pull off that like creepy moaning sound that she heard outside of the room. And Debbie's like, what the fuck? I thought that was you. I didn't do that. And right as she says that, they hear this creepy moaning sound again. And so her and Eliza are like all huddled together, like, what the fuck is that noise? And they're in their huddling, they like back up into a corner in this room that they're in, and they, of course, classic 90s animation, they trigger a trap door.
Yes.
Because they like bump into something in this corner. But only Debbie and Eliza fall down the trap door. So Donnie and Darwin are still like in this dungeon. Just keep that in mind.
Okay.
And so Debbie and Eliza, they're like they're falling down this trap door. It's obvious it's like a spiral slide type of situation that they're sent down. But would also be cool. Yes, cool, maybe a little fun, but also very terrifying because it's like dark. They were already in a basement. How deep are you? And like they just keep falling. It's like a very long fall. But thank God it wasn't just like an open trap door. Yeah.
Well, I said cool because I started picturing getting into Yzma's lair in Emperor's New Groove to make myself feel better.
Honestly, it probably was the same one. I told you this looks like some sort of historic site. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just channeling that movie.
Nice. That's the more positive way to do it.
I needed it in the moment. So yes.
Boom. And so once they finally land at the bottom of this trapdoor, they look up and they see that they are even deeper in a cave. And very terrifyingly, that the ceiling is covered with sleeping bats. Absolutely covered. So this is one of those like higher end of the spectrum. Exactly, the 999 sort of like colonies of bats. And Debbie immediately panics, like takes to the feeble position, like, oh my God, my hair, they're going to fly in my hair. But Eliza's trying to calm her down, just like, it's okay, let me just stay here. Let me go find an exit. And so Eliza, poor Eliza, oh girl, she's so naive. She's like, maybe I'll just ask one of these bats very kindly.
Wake them up.
Exactly. Let me ask them if they know if I can get out of here or how I can get out of here. So she's like squeaking up to them, chirping, thinking that, all is chill. That if she just whispers to them like, hey, no, don't worry, don't freak out. I'm on your side, just looking for directions out of here. We just want to find a way out. Unfortunately, the bats do indeed freak the fuck out, right? So one of them hears her and wakes up, and once it like figures out like what's going on, it just sees a fucking human and is like, oh my God, it's a human, run. And all of them wake up and just fly the fuck out. Absolute chaos, and would be terrifying. Reminds me of a scene in Jumanji, like the classic one
original
from the 90s, the original with Robin Williams. I feel like there was a scene where a bunch of bats like fly out of the house. That is one of those movies. It's not a horror movie, but that's still absolutely terrified me as a child, because just like that scene and like a scene where monkeys are just going crazy attacking, those two, both of them absolutely traumatized me as a child. Did not 10 out of 10 did not want to be in that situation ever in my life. Here we are though. Debbie and Eliza are right in the middle of it. But actually very sweetly, Eliza is a good sister, because as soon as these bats start flying everywhere, Debbie is freaking out. She's still already like in the feeble position, but Eliza like jumps on top of her and like covers her head, like, it's okay, you're fine, you're gonna be fine, your hair looks fine, you look good, it's okay. And Debbie's like crying, but Eliza's just like covering her head. Very adorable.
Eliza, this is your fault. Yes.
Protect
your sister. You
better do better. Exactly. This would not have happened but for you.
Yes, waking them up.
So once Eliza is sure that all of the bats are gone, she and Debbie get up and they start to make their way out of the cave, because they're like, okay, the bats went that way, so I guess we should go that way too. Which also, why were the bats sleeping at night? They should have been out hunting. That's when they usually eat, but whatever. I guess maybe it wasn't late enough. This is like,
this was
twilight maybe,
still.
and it's like dusk. It's not quite whatever, but still. And
Eliza
was doing them a favor. Yeah, they were sleeping in a little bit, but Eliza was doing them a favor. Like, come on, get to hunting, get to blood sucking. Go find those.
Go on, guys, get to hunting and blood sucking. Yeah, I'm a mammal. Why'd you ask?
Yeah.
Sometimes they call me Grubhub. What's up? I'm pumping with it. Why?
Yeah, we deliver. We're caterers. Actually, we're going to prepare the meal at your home. So,
why do you ask?
So anyway, they get up. They start to make their way out of the cave. But before they get far, they again hear that same moaning that they heard before they fell down this trapdoor. And they start to see a shadowy figure approaching them from the cave's depths. And the moaning is getting louder and louder. Mm-hmm. And, you know, me personally, I'm like, all right, really time to GTFO. Run as fast as you can.
Like, you've seen The Descent, so you've been out of this cave for hours at this point, right?
I was never in the cave to begin with. Trap door, no, I would be like holding on for dear life to like the edges of the opening. Like, oh my God, no, there's no way I'm going deeper into anything here. No. Debbie is on my page, like, okay, that looks like a vampire. We're getting the fuck out of here. Yeah. But Eliza is like, no, vampires don't exist. Mutated cave schmeagles do, though. Okay, Eliza.
Murderers do, Eliza.
So, but no. She's like, vampires don't exist. We need to go see what this man wants. He clearly needs our help. So she makes her way to the shadowy figure. Debbie is like, be my guest. Like, have at it. I'm not going to stop you, even though you just saved me. Although it was your fault that I needed the saving anyway, whatever.
It's complicated.
And so, in the first place. And so as Eliza makes her way closer to this figure, she actually lets out a very like loud gasp and calls for Debbie to come quickly. And at this point, Debbie springs into protective sister mode and she's like, oh, no, don't you dare hurt my sister. And she's ready to attack the man. But Eliza stops her and says, hold on, no, Debbie, wait, before we can actually see who this shadowy figure is.
Okay.
And so put a pin in that because we now see this. Do though, I'm making you.
Okay.
Because we now see this plume of bats that Eliza has just awoken, whatever, flying out of the cave, but perfectly as Nigel stands at the entrance and begins filming his segment on bats. Yes. So Marianne is actually able to get this in their terms. For me, it'd be terrifying, but for them, it's actually a fantastic shot of these vampire bats just like flying out of this cave as Nigel is standing there talking about how beautiful they are, you know, how they're getting ready to start their hunt, whatever, doing his amazing narration job. But hilariously, you've got Spinoza.
I was going to ask where he was.
Also, like, he's running around playing with them, like, yes, be free, my children. Running around, like, playing with his cape. Oh, no. And, like, flailing his cape around, getting all up in this shot, and eventually, like, knocking Nigel over mid-sentence, like, as he's trying to narrate this segment. And Marianne yells at him, like, oh, man, you ruined my shot. Like, can you please just stand to the side? And she turns around to like readjust her camera and the lighting and everything. And as she's not looking, this dude literally like tries to run up on her and bite her neck. Like, but right as he grabs for her, we hear Eliza inside of the cave, like saying, Mom, watch out. And Marianne goes full fucking Cobra Kai, turns around, like grabs him and like throws him over her. Like,
Marianne.
Yeah, let's go, Marianne. She dropped out of his biology class so that she could actually learn Krav Maga, it turns out. And like how to use a camera, I guess.
Yeah, so, film school, karate school.
Same thing. So Eliza and Debbie, they like walk out of the cave, and Marianne and Nigel are like, what are you guys doing here? By the way, also all those bats just flew out. Like, are you okay?
Yes.
What's going on? And Eliza like runs right up to Dr. Spinoza and points at him like, Mary, or like, Mom, that's not Dr. Spinoza. That man who you just yeeted across the freaking camera shot. That's not the real Dr. Spinoza. And Debbie's like, yeah, this is. And out behind her, we see this tall, dashing, very handsome gentleman. Yes. Much more beautiful than the man who I described earlier as being Dr. Spinoza. We see him walking out of the cave behind them, and he's like pulling ropes off of him, mind you, like he was roped up, tied up in this cave. And this man, the real Dr. Spinoza, hilariously, like somewhat does resemble Nigel. Like he's got a big nose, but like the Nigel kind of big, not the long pointy nose that this other guy I mentioned has, but big, thick, long nose. He's got, kind of a pointed chin. He's got a thick mustache, although he's got dark hair and it's curled up at the ends. And yes, like a pointed chin with a beard. He's mostly bald, which isn't like Nigel, but he is also in like the typical kind of Indiana Jones type of like adventurous professors type of suit, like a tan suit with a darker smoker's jacket over top of it.
Yeah.
And Nigel, after he sees him, he whispers to Marianne, like, "Oh, Marianne, you were right about the real Dr. Spinoza. He is handsome indeed."
He's like, this guy?
This guy, oh my. And Dr. Spinoza immediately, funny, hilarious, coming from your episode last week, Dr. Spinoza does actually recognize Nigel Thornberry. He walks in like, "Nigel Thornberry, an honor to meet you," and like shakes his hand. Yeah, before Nigel can even introduce himself. And then he looks over, Dr. Spinoza looks at Marianne saying, "And Marianne Hunter, second seat, third row, Zoology 101. And Marianne's like swooning, like, yes, it's me. Oh man.
They're both swooning as like swooning. A man is unconscious next to them at Marianne's feet. They're like, "Oh, it's getting hot in here."
Oh, it is. That was just Marianne getting warmed up. So then we go back into Dr. Spinoza's castle. They're back in the dining hall, like sitting in front of the fireplace.
Happening to the body of this other man.
No, I'll kind of get to it in a second. So Dr. Spinoza reveals that the man who is impersonating him, he literally calls him the Hunchback. He's the Hunchback. His real name is Carlos Bayales or something along those lines, also known, and this is hilarious, as El Gordito. Now, Grace, with your knowledge of the Spanish language, I must ask if you know
the
what
fatty.
El Gordito is.
They're just rude as hell.
Or little fat kid, or perhaps dumpling, depending on which. Okay, I will say, from my research, I did look this term up, and I was like, okay, is this a term of endearment? I cannot tell. It may be, depending on
situational.
Yes, exactly. So if you're Hispanic and listening, or, at any way related to the Hispanic culture, drop it in the comments. Like, is El Gordito calling someone chubby or like little fat kid? Is that a term of endearment, or is it just straight up an insult?
I think it's like
you said, it's situational.
Parent, yeah, I think it's like a parent to a kid or like family to a kid. It's endearing. But like, I feel like if you just say
a stranger,
yeah, after you just called him a hunchback, I'm feeling it's not an endearing situation.
Yeah, I don't think so. Not in this case. Not calling a full-grown adult that. I don't think so. Yeah, and you're probably even more so correct, because what Spinoza says next is that El Gordito is, well, what we would call our village idiot.
Oh my God.
But also sad. And Marianne is like, well, that's not a very nice thing to call someone. So good for you, Marianne, standing up to this man.
True.
But Spinoza's like, go ahead. Yeah.
No, just keep going. I've got a lot of questions.
Yeah. Spinoza's like, well, it's just that, he recently bought a satellite dish and now he's got access to all sorts of like American horror movies and stuff. And Nigel's like, oh, good heavens, how terrible. Which is also hilarious because by this point, Tim Curry was a bit of an American horror icon because of like Clue, because of It, because of
oh my God,
a number
like Rocky
of other
Horror,
things.
everything.
Rocky Horror,
he's a cult classic.
Show. Exactly at this point. So the fact that Nigel is the one who's like, oh, how terrible access to American horror pictures. Does like the Jim Halpert look off camera.
Yeah. Cashes another check.
Yes. But nevertheless, Spinoza is like, well, anyway, thank you, Eliza and Debbie, for finding me. I was afraid that all my moaning and groaning was just going to scare you away like it naturally should have. They run towards the danger, as we've talked about in previous weeks. And so at this point, Marianne's like, so what happened to El Gordito though? Like, by the way, what happened to that body that I just left there?
You guys kicked that ass.
And honestly, the dude, he gets off easy. Spinoza's like, well, I told him that he's been very naughty and I just sent him home. So let's hope that he learns the difference between reality and television. That's it. They don't call the authorities. Like, the dude clearly came to his house and like attacked him.
Yes.
Tied him up and then like threw him in a cave for
left him for dead.
For dead, literally. If the Thornberrys hadn't visited, and if the daughters weren't just like nosying around and
in the depths of a cave.
Yeah, sorry, you can probably hear like thunder outside of my window now. It's starting to rain, which is perfect for this episode. Yes. But yeah, like, he didn't know that the Thornberrys were visiting. He was surprised to see them there. He was like, oh, what brings you to my home, when he first opened the door for them. So like, you're just going to let this guy go back to his home? And that's what he does. So we just see him in the very last scene of the episode, El Gordito or Carlos, whatever, he's sitting in his little, kind of decrepit little hut at the bottom of the mountain with this massive satellite dish like sticking out of the straw roof of it. He's just flipping through channels trying to find something to watch. And he comes across none other than an episode of the Thornberrys show where Nigel is like talking about the zebras and the plains of the savannah. And so then he starts to like imitate Nigel speaking in his accent, and then just like lets out his like evil laughter as the camera pans out and the episode ends.
That's the worst, most terrifying ending they could have ever possibly done. It's absolutely
terrifying. It's like, this is perfect for a Halloween episode because the killer is still on the loose.
Yes. The killer is still on, like, how many other people in this town has he successfully murdered? Mm-hmm. He was going to murder Spinoza, clearly. Mm-hmm. And now he's going to fucking murder Nigel.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Hopefully they don't ever go back to Peru, except they do. I feel like in like the next episode they're still in Peru or something.
They need to get the fuck out, and someone needs to report this man's crimes.
Please.
Just
like I understand
mental situation, mental hospital.
Yeah, it's like, I understand being sensitive about, people's states of mind and whatnot and all that. He clearly he's unstable and definitely needs help.
Yes.
But at the same time, like,
what they should
just putting him back in his home unsupervised after he's done something very, very terrible is not the kind of help that he needs.
Exactly.
So, because it's not help at all. So
yeah, you're actually making the situation possibly worse.
Mm-hmm. So this actually may be one of our, and I guess in addition to your episode last week that absolutely involves some legitimate crime, but this may be like one of the closest like actual true crime and survival episodes that we'll cover for
like the piece of it, or at least like the scariest criminal we may have ever covered. I would say in any of our shows, because this one is straight up like, this is a serial killer for sure.
Creepy. Yeah,
he is escalating his crimes. He just wants to be those people. He's gonna start wearing faces as soon as he starts murdering.
Oh my god, he is Leatherface. He's Charlie Ray.
100%. Wow.
Also, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, wow, you did such a great job. I hated this episode.
I'm so glad you said that. Thank you. And also, I'm glad you said you hated this episode, because I don't know about you, but when we first decided to do this show, and I'm sure we both like run to Wikipedia to just like skim through episode descriptions, like which ones do we want to do? Have there been any that like while you're reading through them, you're just like, oh my god, like blast from the past, file from my past, unlocked. I remember this episode.
Yeah, but not this one, I will say.
This one for me, I was like, wait, this sounds so familiar. Just this bare like 2-sentence bare minimum description of this episode that's on Wikipedia. And then I went to watch it and I was like, wait, it was like going through like a time warp. I literally remember watching this episode when I was younger.
Whoa.
And from the beginning, as soon as I saw the Dr. Spinoza, I was like, isn't it like not him at the end of the episode? Like the first time when I started rewatching it, was like, why do I feel like he's actually not the real Dr. Spinoza, and something happens where he's like an imposter.
It's like the vague memory.
Yeah, it's like something is churning in my brain here, like a file way back there. So
getting dusted off.
This was definitely a memorable one for me, and probably the fact that I remember it that much, maybe it was one of my favorite episodes of the show. So the fact that you're just like, I hate this one.
Well, I was gonna say this is all so on brand that like you would remember the horror movie episode and I would black it out forever based on the fact that you love horror movies and I refuse to watch them.
Yeah. It's like, how do you remember this show? What do you remember from the show growing up? Oh yeah, the one that was like the absolute horror movie of an episode. Yeah, that's for me. Meanwhile, Grace is like, oh, just like the one where she talks to, the red panda. I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen.
And you're like,
yeah.
The serial killer episode.
Show me the blood.
And I'm like
the vampire.
Well, I'm really excited to watch it though, to see if I do have any like, I don't know, maybe I'll have to like watch it and then immediately have my therapy appointment of like what uncovered memories are going to come forward from like any part of my life.
I'm so sorry for bringing them back.
Unlock a vault of repressed memories for me.
Sorry about it. Well,
no, I'm so excited to watch it.
Until then, when you have to unlock that vault or open that vault, who should they tell about the podcast/podcast?
I think you should tell someone in your life who, and I feel like we all have at least one of these people in our life, who like more than a casual love for it, but like someone who loves vampires. Like we all know someone, whether it's like Twilight, that's the main one.
Yeah.
As millennial women, we probably know multiple people who really love Twilight.
Yeah.
Or just any vampire-esque, True Blood, I don't know, Buffy, whatever it might be, someone who just like more than the average Joe loves vampires. Tell them about this episode. This is definitely an episode for them.
It's for them. Yeah. And I guess also tell someone who loves werewolves. It may be the same person, because apparently in my last fun fact, I guess this is actually more a folklore thing because this is about like vampires, not vampire bats. But apparently they turn into bats when they are hunting you or like scouting you out, but they turn into werewolves or into wolves when you run away. So a lot of people actually say that zombies, werewolves, and vampires are all like in the same family, technically.
Oh, wait, what about how zombies in there?
Because vampires turn you into zombies, or they can. It's weird. They kind of do it all. It's weird. They're like
they either just killed you or turned you into a vampire. I didn't know a zombie was a third option.
They can but like technically a vampire is a zombie because it's undead. True. Yeah. It's like it's kind of fast and loose playing of the vampire rules, the gray area of the vampire code. But yes, so they apparently they can turn into werewolves. They technically are zombies because they're dead, but they're also undead. And they're vampires. So it's kind of like the best of three worlds.
Would you rather be hunted down by them in their bat form, vampire form, or
bat
form. Or wolf form?
Bat form, for sure.
Just swat it out of the sky.
Exactly. Just swat. Get a gun. Sorry,
if it's
PETA.
The size of my pinky finger.
Yeah.
They're just smacking that shit.
Definitely not the wolf form. That's absolutely last on the list. But all you gotta do is wait for the sun to rise, and then boom, poof, they're gone.
Bam, done. So, wow, incredible.
Thank you.
Great job.
Anyway, till next time.
Yep. All right. Be safe out there, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Saturday Morning Mysteries.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share, rate, review, leave us a like, and drop a comment. We post episodes every Saturday and bonus tune tangents whenever we feel like it. So please subscribe so you don't miss the shenanigans.
And if you want to follow us on YouTube, click the bell under the YouTube subscribe button to receive notifications when new videos are posted.
And if you want to subscribe to the podcast, we have no idea what you're listening to us on. So just hit the big subscribe button on whatever app you're using. We believe in you.
Give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram at SatmornMist, all the abreves, and let us know if you have any episode or show requests by emailing SaturdayMorningMysteries@gmail.com.
Thanks to Jenna Kendall for the logo design and to Ava Sakiki for the music used during this week's episode.
See y'all groovy kids next week on Saturday Morning Mysteries.